Carlespie.
Mary Alice McKinney is an essayist and a poet and a professor at OCC. And sit back, relax, and get taken where his story takes you. Carlespie, Mary Alice McKinney.
When I was 2 years old, my mother met and married a man with whom she had 6 other children. My earliest memories of how that man, that person, treated my mother, it was as if his mission was to beat and mangle, otherwise humiliate and terrorize her and her children. I remember an occasion in which he was beating her, and he took the belt and began beating her with the buckled end of the belt, ripping her clothes off. And this was done in the middle of the day, in the middle of the street. Another occasion of my earliest childhood memories. I was awakened one night to the sound of dishes crashing, something tumultuous happening in the kitchen. And I could hear someone being choked and then screaming and then being choked and screaming. When all of that ended, I fell asleep again. And the next morning, someone approached me with this grotesque-looking face. Someone I did not recognize. And this person was telling me to get ready for school. And so I wondered, it had to be my mother because no one else would be telling me to get ready for school. And an example of how he tried to humiliate my mother, when his family once visited, he poured some liquor into a small glass and demanded my mother stand there until she drank it all, and she was not a drinker at all. And she stood there sipping for at least 3 hours. When I was 11, we moved to California, and the violence continued. As a matter of fact, it even made the local newspaper. He was called the Human Hurricane for what he had done. And it was at that time my mother told me that I'll be glad when you get big so your father will not beat me anymore. I was 11. When I was 12, and in the month of April, my grandmother from Detroit, my mother's mother, was visiting. She visited. And it was at that time that my mother found the courage. She mustered up the courage to leave him and to leave us with him. Now, she did not go far because she would often stand at a very safe distance and watch us play in the backyard. And when I would walk to school, she'd meet me halfway, and we would talk, and she would confide in me, and I in her. That was in April when I was 12. 2 months later, June 17th to be exact, that person's sister and mother visited him and gave him something which he put inside his inside pocket in his jacket. And later that day, he said to me, "We're going to go looking for your mother." And so we got in the car, and when we got into the car, he reached inside his inside pocket and gave me $42. And then we proceeded. And the first stop was a neighbor's house down the street, and he sent me to the front porch to see. He said, "Go see if your mother's there." So I walk up to the front porch. The front door's open. There's a screen door, though, however, and I look through the screen, and I see my mother, my grandmother, and this man and woman with their children, all watching television. And I said, Mama, Daddy sent me here to see if you were here. And she said, well, tell him I'm here. So I go back to the car and let him know that, and we both walk back up to the porch. And he stands at the screen door. I'm next to him. And my mother comes to the screen door, so it's a screen door between them. And in the sweetest and in the tenderest, softest of voices, he was begging my mother to come out so they could talk. I'd never heard such a soft sound from him, how sweet it was, how tender it was. He spoke as if he were a broken man. And so my mother refused, but then she looked at me standing there and she relented and came out onto the front porch. And she said, now what do you want to talk about? He didn't say a word. He reached into his inside pocket, pulled out a gun, pop, 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 pop. I panicked and I ran for about a half a block. At that point, I stopped running. And I began to walk very casually, nonchalantly. I was not crying. I did not weep. I did not sob. There was nothing about me that would reveal that I had just witnessed a horror. I meandered around the city of Pasadena. I stopped in a store and I bought a bag of Fritos, corn chips, and I bought an apple and wandered around until dark. I found my way back to the house. The police were there. And I said, can I see my mama? And they said, no, but I saw this pool of blood. My grandmother was there, and she ended up taking me back with her to Detroit. And as a teen, I was well behaved, performed well in school. In fact, I won an academic scholarship to Cranbrook High School, one of the most prestigious high schools in the country. Also during my teen years, I became involved in a high-control religion, Jehovah's Witnesses. And in my 20s, by the time I was in my 20s, I was married, fathered 4 children that I doted over like a papa bear. And during that time, I wanted my sister to come live with me, my baby sister. So of necessity, I had to speak to that man, or that person. And on the phone, he told me that he was not sorry because he had served 9 years in prison and was released. And he said he had no regret. In fact, he said, I even reloaded twice because he shot my mother 11 times. I quickly ended that conversation, of course. Also in my 20s, I lost a dear friend who was murdered at the Michigan Central train station. And when I heard about that, I wept and sobbed and prayed and begged to die. In my 30s, I rejected Jehovah's Witnesses. I rejected eventually all religion. I became a deist. I also ended up getting divorced. And in my late 30s, early 40s, I met and fell in love with a young woman whom I thought loved me, but when my money ran out, her love ran out. But when her love ran out, it devastated me. I was broken. I lost 40 pounds. I was almost homeless. And in fact, I would every day call my best friend, Dwight Stackhouse, a.k.a. Skip Stackhouse, and each day I would crown his shoulders, and he would, without being exasperated, without being frustrated, encourage me to think more of myself, to understand that I've got to take care of me. The lesson was never swim as far or farther than you can swim back. And that goes also for loving somebody. And during this very dark period of my life, I pulled out all the major beliefs I had and examined them. I would step on them, push them, shove them, kick them, and any belief that stood up, I accepted. Those that did not, I rejected. For instance, being a man, we find that too many people think they're men, but they are males impersonating men. They define their masculinity in terms of their sexuality, or they define their being a man in terms of dominating someone like the man my mother married. That's not a man. But during this period of time, I also had to face one question, and I could not dismiss that question. Why was it that I wept when a friend of mine died? Why was it crushed when someone broke my heart and left me? But I did not cry or weep when my mother was murdered right next to me. I had to answer that question. And the answer came in two parts. One, I was in shock. And I refused to let that horror come in. I kept it at bay for more than 20 years. But the main question, the main answer was this. I was so relieved, so happy and relieved not to be living under that tyranny that it crowded out any kind of pain, any kind of sorrow I felt for my mother. There was no room for it because I was so happy to not be living under that tyranny. And when I realized that, I felt so ashamed. I felt so guilty that I did not protect my mother. I didn't even cry. And on that day when I realized that, I wept and sobbed as if she had died that day. And so I decided to do three things. One, every birthday and death day, I mourn. I call it celebrate and mourn, or mourn my mother by indulging in her vices. I would drink some Pepsi, take some strawberry ice cream, and also have some cream-filled vanilla cookies in honor of her. Secondly, I actually, as strange as it may sound, put myself on trial for cowardice. There were reasons to call me a coward, and there were reasons not to. And the verdict, after much deliberation, in my mind, the verdict is not guilty. In my heart, I was a coward, but I did not commit cowardice, however strange that may sound. And the third and last thing I did is I legally changed my name from Carlespie McKinney to Carlespie Mary Alice McKinney. And whenever I sign my name, I sign my full name to honor her memory and to assuage my shame. I am a man, but I am Carlespie Mary Alice McKinney.
Carlespie Mary Alice McKinney. Thank you.